You know, Warcraft isn't that bad for what's basically an alien invasion movie. Warcraft! So Warcraft is the tepidly anticipated movie that finally came out, just like the upcoming expansion Legion, because let's be honest, by this point Blizzard's really just going along for the ride. The story sets up its themes pretty accurately. It introduces the Horde as these barbaric, warlike invaders trying to take over all of Azeroth, and it sets up the humans as these peaceful, merciful fighters who will fight for what they believe in. I gotta say, the writers get high points for accuracy in that, because let's be honest, the Horde are the bad guys and the Alliance are the good guys. It doesn't matter how hard you type angrily in the comments section because you know it's true. Fuck the Horde for the Alliance! Trolling's fun. Now, the actual plot of the movie takes place during what's known as the Second War. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Warcraft's lore, that's basically when the orcs came in and invaded Azeroth. Azeroth being the land that's mostly dwelled by humans, but also dwarves, high elves, so on and so forth. And the orcs did this because their world was dying because blah 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 shitty magic. A lot of this actually encompasses the events that happened in Warcraft 2, which, full disclosure, I never actually played. I did, however, play Warcraft 3, The Frozen Throne, and a shit ton of World of Warcraft, so I'm pretty well versed when it comes to the events in this world. That being said, I can't really speak to a lot of the specifics of the movie and how well it was adapted, but I can point out some of the little Easter eggs they included, as well as some of the mistakes they made. For example, if you're paying attention, you'll actually notice some very familiar character designs. Aside from the obvious characters who were actually given names on screen, like Medivh and Khadgar and Lothar and King Lane and Duratan, Gul'dan, all those guys. Grommash makes a number of appearances, actually. Thrall is one of the subplots, although he's never really named Thrall. And a few others if you pay attention. And for the most part, I gotta say, I was actually really impressed with how they laid out a lot of the architecture and a lot of the topography of the world. Stormwind really looks like Stormwind. Ironforge really looks like Ironforge. Elwynn Forest really looks like Elwynn Forest. It shouldn't really come as a surprise given how involved Blizzard was in production of the movie, but it's satisfying to see them actually take this level of care in making everything look pristine, and like they actually took some inspiration from the games and weren't just pulling everything out of their asses like so many other video game adaptations. There were, however, mistakes. I'm not sure who's at fault for that. The one that really pissed me off, for example, is what they did to Dalaran. Now, context for those of you who are not familiar, Dalaran is basically the home of some of the most powerful mages on the planet called the Kirin Tor. Skipping a lot of details just for the sake of time, Dalaran was invaded by a zombie army in the events of Warcraft 3. I point this out because this is all supposed to happen after the movie, and yet somehow, for some reason, Dalaran is floating in the sky! Dalaran doesn't float until the events of Wrath of the Lich King. How the hell is Arthas and his army supposed to invade it if it's floating 1,000 feet in the air? How do you fuck whether or not a city is floating or not? Okay, that's my nerd rage out of the way for the moment. Aside from that obnoxious mistake, I gotta say that, as far as my knowledge goes, this was a pretty decent adaptation. A lot of things got glazed over, a lot of things got skipped, a lot of things were dropped just for the sake of making a 2-hour movie, which is something you gotta account for. But the stuff that they did include was still pretty good, and there was still some gripping action scenes. For the sake of the movie, though, there were a number of issues I had. Starting out, the movie's pacing is incredibly rushed. I'd say like the first third, they were trying to spout as much exposition and get as much setup going as they possibly could. But the problem with how they did it is that if you're not familiar with Warcraft lore, a lot of this is going to go right over your heads. Yes, you'll have just enough to go off of. People who are new to Warcraft will understand what's going on, but they won't understand the depth of what's going on. They never explain what the Guardian is and why he's so important. They barely explain any of the characters or any of the culture or any of the world. As far as culture, the most we get is just stuff from the Orcs' perspective. And even then, we don't even get that much. Several characters aren't really named until they've been on screen for several scenes. And if you're trying to bring this movie to audiences who aren't familiar with the lore, that is a big mistake. I mean, I think Lothar's name finally got dropped in the 5th scene he was in. So really this movie was made just for the fans. It wasn't made for anyone else. Kind of limiting your audience, but at least you're trying to appeal to your audience. So I guess it's kind of doing things right. As far as the technicals go, they really did a great job. Like I said, the setting and the architecture is gorgeous. The special effects, as you would expect, are fantastic. The acting is actually pretty solid. Now, with the pacing the way that it is and how much plot they try to cram into a 2-hour movie, you don't really get a lot of time to really get attached to most of the characters, but with what they had to work with, it's actually pretty good. And for the most part, the CGI actually worked with the real-life elements pretty effectively. Though more times than not, they relied on CGI fighting CGI, like when the humans fought the orcs. Every once in a while, you'd have a real-life human fighting an orc, and for the most part, that actually looked pretty solid too. Not 100%, but if there's one thing Blizzard can do right, it's animation. As far as the rest of the movie, they actually do a pretty good job of setting up certain plot scenes, wrapping most of those up, but still leaving enough untied that they have room for a sequel. It wasn't great writing, I mean, like I said, it was made just for the fans, but there is enough there to enjoy that, yeah, I'd go see a sequel. Overall, I'd say this is a pretty good movie if you're familiar with the lore. If you've never heard of Warcraft before, this'll just be an average action movie for you. So, have you guys seen Warcraft? What did you think? Have you ever played World of Warcraft? If so, what class did you play? I personally played a human warrior on the Scarlet Crusade realm. I was Kashim, raid leader for the Legion of Chaos. I am also a complete dork. Whatever your thoughts, leave them in the comments section below. Okay, so this is totally true. When the movie was over, everyone was getting up and leaving. And one guy, as he was leaving, shouted, "For the Horde!" And so I screamed back, "For the Alliance!" And then some third guy screams, "For the Pandas!" If you're a fan of Warcraft, that'll make you laugh.